This presentation is titled Long-Term Effects of Mental and Emotional Abuse. So good afternoon. This presentation is going to outline the long-term impact of mental and emotional abuse on all relationships in adulthood. It will also identify and describe 3 ways that a provider could intervene and build resiliency. Starting with some definitions, some important definitions. Tilstra-Farrell researchers define emotional abuse as the failure of a child's caregiver to provide their child with a supportive and developmentally appropriate environment, and that results in harm to their development or their physical and their mental health. So examples would be any non-physical intimidation or aggressive behaviors like humiliating, threatening, or rejecting. Or then talking about mental and psychological abuse, those are the behaviors of a caregiver that could interfere with a child's independent thinking and their understanding of reality. Examples would be isolation, control, or distortion of the truth. Both types of abuse can cause a child or an adolescent to live in fear and anxiety for their safety or for the safety of those they love. So while there's an overlap between these 2 types of non-physical abuse, a good distinction I would make is that emotional abuse focuses on how a person feels about themselves and tearing down that, while psychological abuse would work to distort a person's thinking about truth and about reality. So why is this a critical developmental issue if children and adolescents have experienced this type of abuse? Well, research has linked child maltreatment of this sort to internalizing disorders like depression and anxiety, and also externalizing behaviors like emotional eating and substance abuse. So emotional and mental abuse of children has also been linked to difficulties in adulthood, like healthy parenting practices and healthy intimate relationships. Healthy attachment to a caregiver is essential for developing trust and having feelings of security. And when healthy attachment is disrupted by a parent that is inconsistent or unresponsive, or even worse, verbally abusive and harsh, a child or adolescent can become either avoidant or excessively dependent. And these attachment patterns that are formed early on can predict attachment across their lifespan. So that's the importance of this and why it is critical to talk about it. So researchers have identified 2 types of attachment insecurity: attachment avoidance and attachment anxiety. So we're going to talk about the difference between the 2. Attachment avoidance would result in a fear of intimate relationships and a belief that others are not trustworthy or reliable. A person with this would detach when they're faced with an emotional threat in a relationship, like a conflict. They might withhold commitment or downplay their own needs. On the other hand, attachment anxiety involves the perception of themselves as not worthy of love and a fear of being abandoned. So this would hyperactivate their attachment, and it would reveal itself with overdependence or neediness or working too hard to seek the approval of a friend or a romantic partner. So on the other hand, talking about a healthy attachment model, if a child or adolescent lacks a secure caregiver attachment, there is evidence, however, that a supportive adult, mentor, close friend, or romantic partner can be a substitute in emerging adulthood, specifically ages 18 to 25. And in that developmental stage, it's where individuals are transitioning between reliance on a parent to reliance on a romantic partner. So Pigeon et al., some researchers state that both romantic relationships and friendships can be a positive source of support and relational growth for those who've experienced child maltreatment, like emotional abuse. The authors state that positive experiences in chosen relationships, whether they're romantic or just friendships, can teach important interpersonal skills like communication, boundary setting, conflict management, as well as trust. So that is a point of hope that healthy attachment can be formed even if they've had these negative experiences. So what are some ways then that providers can intervene and build resiliency and those healthy attachments. So one way is through teaching coping skills and emotional regulation skills. So teaching coping skills and developing that emotional regulation are interventions that could help build resiliency. According to Gruen and Compas, coping and emotional regulation are the behavioral and cognitive strategies that an individual uses to respond to both internal and external experiences. Coping involves those conscious choices used to respond to stress, while emotional regulation can include both controlled and automatic processes that influence our emotional expression. And when children have early experiences with trauma, emotions and behaviors become disconnected. So helping a survivor of abuse regulate their emotions would involve uniting that mind and body through strategies that help to identify, express, and manage the emotions that are confusing. So this might involve using behavior chains to find triggers for emotional dysregulation, using feelings wheels or grounding skills, and those might be things that work with child and adolescents. Researchers assert that disengagement, coping, or emotional suppression, while those can be coping skills, they can be momentarily helpful, but they are less likely to lower the overall stress levels, while choices like primary coping, like adaptation and acceptance and work with problem solving, can definitely increase mental health wellness overall and long term. So a second idea for an intervention or strategies to build resilience is to build healthy relationship models. So an intervention that could build resiliency and serve as a protective factor is that opportunity to see healthy relationship models. Relationships with positive adult role models outside of the family, like teachers, faith leaders, or coaches, can help decrease the impact of those adversities like emotional abuse. A provider could refer to a community organization like Coach Kids, mentoring, or suggest interactions with a faith community with opportunities to observe healthy marriages and positive choice friendships with peers. Giving a client the opportunity to witness healthy conflict resolution within a trusting and a committed relationship could positively impact those ideas they have about emotional safety and fears of being vulnerable. If a client is an emerging adult or a new parent, providing a mentor or classes that could help with parenting skills would also contribute to breaking that cycle of generational abuse and mitigate that risk for the next generation. So building healthy relationship models would be a great choice. All right, and the last possible intervention that would build resiliency would be to empower a client's agency through encouraging the use of voice and then using some attachment-based interventions, because we know a healthy attachment is very important. So some final suggestions for a client with a history of emotional abuse would be an approach that highlights a client's personal strengths and personal control of their decisions. So identifying the personal and cultural strengths that exist and using goal setting to help develop a plan for change. Teaching the client how to set appropriate boundaries in relationships and to speak honestly about emotional needs and feelings will improve their communication skills and reduce unhealthy patterns or thoughts that are not helpful. Increasing agency will result in the ability to handle stressful situations by making intentional decisions about their life. Additionally, attachment-based interventions that improve the quality of a parent-child interaction, even into emerging adulthood, have been found to be a protective factor in reducing insecurity in romantic relationships later on. So including group therapies for both parents and children could have the potential to influence the growth and change of at-risk youth who've experienced childhood abuse. So in conclusion, couple final thoughts. Children and adolescents who've experienced mental and emotional abuse do have increased risk of the quality of their relationships throughout their lifespan. Parent and child attachment is influenced by experiences of abuse, and that presents challenges for all of their chosen relationships in adulthood. So intervening with a client to challenge faulty beliefs and build those pro-social behaviors can have positive results for clients and hopefully their families for generations.